Hey guys, today we're going to be replacing a rear lug on a 2013 Subaru BRZ. I have another video where if you're needing to replace a front or lug bolt, but this one today is going to be focused on doing the rear. It's mostly the same as the front. It's a little bit tighter in there, so I wanted to show you exactly how I do that. If you're interested in that, stick around and we'll show you how to do it. Alright, here are the tools that I used to do this job. We've got a 1/2 inch breaker bar, a 1/2 inch torque wrench, a 3/8 inch torque wrench, 3/8 ratchet, the new lug nut and lug stud, a wire brush, something to hang the caliper with, 3-pound sledge, some anti-seize lubricant. You may not need that if you don't have problems with the rotors being rusted on. Some PB blaster. That is an extension, a mid extension with a 12 millimeter socket. You need a 17 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, and a 19 millimeter. And yep, that's it. Let's get started. Okay, so first you want to loosen each bolt while it's still on the ground. And I do that with 1/2 inch breaker bar. This is the one that's frozen. So this lug here, nut, is frozen on the stud. So we're gonna have to snap this off. Now, you may be able to kind of chip this away to where you could get some penetrating oil in there, and that may work. I haven't tried that because I just haven't. So that may be an option. At least then you could save the stud and then just put a new lug nut in. But in our case, that is not what we're gonna do. So we will have to snap this off, which takes a bit of force. Sometimes a foot is handy. There it goes. There's a crack, and there it is. So as you can see from here, there's the snapped lug. Okay, so now we need to jack up the car and remove this wheel. So if you're not familiar with how to jack up the rear end of the Subaru, I have a link, or I have another video where I show how to do that. So I'll put the link here in the upper corner up here. Okay, so finish taking the lug nuts off and remove the tire. Now what we need to do is we have to take this rotor off, and in order to do that we're going to have to remove the brake caliper, which are these bolts right here. I believe, I don't know what those are, I'll tell you in a second, but there's one up here and then there's one down here somewhere. Yeah, it's right there. Okay. But first thing, we want to take this brake line bolt off, and that's a 12 millimeter. So let's remove that, and then we're going to take these two bolts out, and then we'll hang this caliper up on a hook here on this spring right here. Okay. There's that. And sometimes this can get in the way, but we're going to try to leave that alone. That's the speed sensor. But yeah, we're going to try to not have to replace that, or to take that off. Okay, so now we're going to take these bolts off here. Yeah, so that's a 14 millimeter. These should only be about, I don't know, 40 foot-pounds, so we should be able to just, yeah, get that off with just a little persuasion. So I'm not going to take this bolt all the way out, because if I do, and then I take the bottom one out, I don't want this thing to slide down and fall on me. So we're going to loosen the lower one now. This bolt right there. 1/2 inch breaker bar here. And then that should do it. There we go. All right, got that out. Okay, so now we're going to use one of these to actually hang the caliper up on the spring here to get it out of the way, but then to also keep this brake line from being too, we don't want that brake line to be stressed in any way. This bolt out. Alright, so those two bolts are removed, but now I'm having some problems getting the, there we go. So it came off. It did need a little persuasion, but you know, we got it. Okay, so now let's, like I said, I'm going to hang this somewhere to kind of get it out of the way. And if you're like, I'm going to take these brake pads out. So that makes it this part a little bit easier. So I'm going to hang this right here, kind of out of the way, and we'll just make sure that our brake line isn't tight or anything. And so we're just hanging that right there. I'd like for it to be a little higher, but I guess I'll take what I can get. So now we need to remove the rotor. Ideally, this rotor would just come off, but ideal never seems to be the case when I'm working on a car. So I've got some penetrating oil, PV blaster, and what I'm going to do is, see these holes right here? I'm going to spray it in these two holes, and then around the hub, or around the, and just kind of let that kind of sit for a few minutes. Typically when I take a rotor off, I'm usually replacing the rotor, but in this case I don't want to have to replace the rotor, so I'm going to try to be careful with it. So I'm going to just tap right here in between all these lugs or studs here to try to loosen up that rust so that it'll pop off. That seemed to help none, which is fine. Well, that didn't work. So the other thing that you can do is remember the brake line bolt we took out, which is right here, is the 12mm. See these holes? You can actually screw that in here and tighten this bolt, and it will slowly pull the rotor off. And just slowly tighten this, and then work it out, and then put it in the other hole. You want to make sure not to cross thread these, obviously. Okay, I see it moving. Almost out. I think we got it. Okay, so now we'll take the rotor and set it in a safe place. Okay, so now here is the broken stud. So to knock that out, I'm going to use a 3-pound baby sledge and just gently tap it out from here. And there we go. So there's your broken stud. Here's the new stud right here. And then I also bought lug nuts, a couple of lug nuts as well. And then I have this one that I painted red. And this is the lug nut that I use to pull. I'll show you what we're going to do here in just a second. But basically we're going to put this in this spot, and then we're going to pull it through. If you see these ridges right here, that's what's going to hold it up to the, but that's what's going to hold it into the hub, is by pulling it through. And then once it's through, we're going to tighten this, and then we're going to use this stud helper that we're going to put in between here, and then tighten this, and as we tighten that, it'll pull this through to sink it up into here. We're going to reach it back in here and try to push it through, but if you notice, so I'm trying to put this in, and you know, you don't really have a ton of room here. So what you do is you kind of angle it in there like that, and then make sure that it's sort of, you know, just barely in that gap, and then you slowly turn the hub assembly. You slowly turn the hub assembly, and you put you don't have to put any pressure or anything, but and then you pull it through, and there you go. So there's a bigger cavity down here where you can do that. You can also do it up here. There's a cavity here that you can do that in. So that's really the main difference between the front and the rear. And so now that we have that, let's put our spacer in there, and then put our sacrificial nut on. And the reason I use, I was saying a sacrificial lug nut here, is because I don't want to damage any of the threads that I'm going to use on another nut. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but somebody told me that a long time ago, so I just always stick with it. So I'm going to get this most of the way with my mini impact here, but I'll probably have to use a breaker bar to get it the rest of the way. So let's see if I can get you to a place where you can see that. So this is what we're watching here. We want to pull that through, so you should see that. Okay, so we're getting closer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our breaker bar back on. And if we were to do this, notice the whole hub is spinning. So we're going to need something here to kind of hold it, to basically pry something in here. But I don't want to do that on just these threads, because obviously that would mess up the threads, and we'd be doing this again in another, the next time we take this wheel off. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put the lug nuts on, these two, and then put the pry bar, basically it's put a long screwdriver or something in between there and hold that up. Right. So now that we have that, you'll pull up and push down as you turn that breaker bar, and that'll keep it in place. So you'll be looking right there. Good. Not quite. I think we're in now. I usually try to stick my head in there and see if we're flush. My eyes aren't nearly as good as they used to be. So put my fingernail in there, and if I don't feel any gaps, usually say I'm good. Alright, so now we're going to snap or zip that off. There we go. So now that stud is on. These BRZs are fairly common that these wheel studs get snapped off. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure and use a wire brush and clean these threads. And then I'm also going to clean around this hub here to make sure that it has a nice, clean, rust-free area to put the rotor back on with. And then I'm also going to put some anti-seize on here. Try to keep the rotor from sticking. Now let's put our rotor back on. The same rotor, I would wire brush the inside of it as well. Just remove all that rust from that area right in here. Okay. So now that that hub or that rotor's back on, I'm going to put a couple of lug nuts in so that it'll hold the rotor on while we put the caliper back on. That'll make that process a lot easier. And I'll just put one. You really probably only need two, but I'll put this third one in. Now we're going to change that caliper, or put the caliper bracket back on. Alright, so let's unhook our caliper. And then slide this back on here. And we're going to put one of our bolts in. Okay, so we're going to put that bolt in. Now, this is the bolt we're putting in, right? So this is our caliper bracket bolt. We're just going to get that in like that. And then we're going to get our other bolt. Okay, that's snug up against there. Now that that's here, we're going to tighten that or torque that to 49 foot-pounds, which is like 66 Newton meters, I believe. There we go. Okay, and so again, 49 foot-pounds. What we're shooting for here. So now the caliper bracket is back on. Now we're going to put this brake line clamp bolt back on. We're going to tighten it to torque it to 15 foot-pounds. Alright, there we go. We're ready to put the wheel back on. Alright, and now I just put the socket in and just snug them up to the hub like that. Again, just to make sure I don't have anything cross-threaded. Okay, now let's lower the car and we'll finish these, or torque these to 80 foot-pounds. And that is it. That's how you change the rear wheel studs in a 2013 Subaru BRZ. Hopefully this video helped you. If it did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. And thanks.